I thought I would open with a discussion of the worldview of a magician
Okay.
because I'm thinking the subtitle of this thing will be Practical Magic for the Modern Mind.
Okay.
And the modern, educated Western mind, all of that, would think about the word magic as something that happens with no cause or with no known cause. It's
Yes.
magic. It just happened. And as a result, many people, especially the more education you get, would say, well, that's impossible.
Mm.
Everything has to have a cause. And some people might admit that there's some things we don't understand very well yet, but there still has to be a cause underneath it. And within reductive materialism, there is no cause, right?
No.
It's so so that's why I thought I would open by talking about worldviews. So I know very well what the scientific worldview is, and I'm wondering then, given your background and training, and also being immersed in the rest of the same world that everybody else is immersed in now, how would you describe what your worldview is that allows for magic to actually happen? In philosophy, reductive materialism says that matter is all that there is, and everything, including your mind, your mental states, your experiences, all of that, ultimately are arising in some way out of matter.
Oh, I
That's what
see.
that's what all the neuroscience models saying, that you are your brain,
Yeah.
like full stop. That's what you are, and so that has given rise to the so-called hard problem of the neurosciences, in which they try to figure out how do you have internal subjective experiences coming out of 3 pounds of neural tissue inside your head. And so people have been working on this for decades, and nobody's any closer today than they have ever been. And so it's considered the hard problem. Like how do you get awareness out of something that doesn't have awareness? So
Okay.
this is producing a change even within science now, where people are coming around to the esoteric worldview, which is that consciousness is fundamental. It's simply part of the fabric of reality.
Yeah.
Whereas not very long ago, maybe 30 years ago, and for a period of 50 years, beginning of the 20th century, within psychology, consciousness was not considered to be a real thing,
Yeah.
right? So behaviorism said there is no consciousness. All there is observed behavior, and there's nothing going on inside. Well, that's ridiculous. But nevertheless, that was the prevailing fad for a long time. So science has been kind of in that space. We're not denying that consciousness exists, but assuming that it is simply arising from matter. But as I said, that's beginning to change. And so the idea of panpsychism and idealism and these other philosophies, all of which are worldviews saying that there's something really fundamental about consciousness, and more importantly, it is prior to the physical world. It's
Mm.
it's it more fundamental than the physical world. Well, from that perspective, magic now is obvious. It has to
Yeah.
happen. So
Gotcha.
that's a long way of saying what I mean by your worldview.
Okay. I always saw it and thought of it as people are seeing it from the wrong angle. If you don't think or can't see that there is a universal consciousness, or we don't call it that, a universal mind, then ESP can't possibly occur, because it's how do you read that guy's mind? You're not connected. It's
Yeah.
not possible. The moment you go, well, it's all in the one mind. Now it's obvious, it's inevitable once you look at it from that viewpoint.
Mhm.
So there's that. When I start pointing this out to, how do I put, lay students that haven't really gone too deep into things yet, I use what I call the sponge analogy, where if you consider a sea sponge at the bottom of the ocean created the sponge. That's where it comes from. That's its god, if that's how you want to put it. The ocean is in the sponge because it's a sponge. So the ocean is in the sponge, and at the same time, the sponge is in the ocean. If you see yourself as a sponge, it answers everything. When it comes to ESP and things like that, magic, it's purely a matter of in the same way that if I ask you now to just be aware of your left big toe, suddenly you're there and it's easy. You become aware of your big toe. It's just changing the coordinates of your focus. Once you realize that there is only one mind and everything is in that mind and that mind is in everything, ESP is purely a matter of focusing in the coordinate. For instance, if I can focus into the coordinates where you are, it's no different to placing your mind and you're becoming conscious of your big toe, becoming aware that it's there. And I'm not talking about the electrical connection between the brain and the toe. I'm just talking about the awareness of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as simple as that. Once you take that on board as a reality, call it what you will, the placebo effect immediately starts to take place and magic happens straight away. And then it's just a matter of getting damn good at it.
Okay, so then why, if it were as simple as that, and maybe it is, uh, then why is it so difficult for many people who would like to do remote viewing, for example? Because that's essentially what we're saying here. Some people are naturally quite good at it, but it's pretty rare. Some people can practice it a lot and become slightly better, but most people can't actually learn how to do this at all. So there's something else getting in the way.
Identity, if you identify fully with the body and the brain that you inhabit and the program that is in there, and that's a huge hurdle. It's more than a hurdle, it's a wall, it's a barrier, a big one, because your belief system just won't let you go there. Quick answer.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense. Yeah, it's like a barrier.
Yeah.
Um,
I often use this analogy. If I got you, you know this. If I got you to walk across a plank of wood this wide, a beam of wood in your back garden, and it's 20 feet long, and you could very quickly walk across that beam and back while you're talking to me or while you're lighting up a cigarette, not an issue. You put that beam of wood 3 stories up in the air, you watch how your identity stops you from walking across. Doesn't matter how much willpower you got, you're not going to win
mm,
unless you train yourself for a very long time, like tightrope walkers do.
yeah.
Same thing. So people underestimate the power of belief greatly. It'll fix you or it will fuck you, to sound gross, but it's a big one.
Yeah.
As a mystic in training, there are many things you do to overcome that. For instance, when I was training in the Himalayas, and China has a similar thing, but I didn't start in China, I started in the Himalayas. I would spend one whole year blindfolded. Literally, you don't see daylight for a whole year. You live your whole life with blindfold, like being blind, and you learn to expand your awareness. Well, you don't, learning is probably the wrong words. It just happens out of
Necessity.
necessity. Thank you. Yeah, I'm tired.
Mhm.
Out of necessity, you start to acquire this heightened sense, and then we would spend another year with beeswax stuck in your ears. So you spend another year being deaf. Same thing happens, and then you spend another year not speaking. So you learn to speak with gesture and face, and after a little while, you start to learn to give off feelings, which becomes part of your
Mm.
discussion with people. A good example is when you walk into a room where someone's had a domestic argument. You know, you walk in, you think, whoa, you could cut the atmosphere in here with a knife, even though you don't know that they've been arguing or hateful to each other. It's there. Something's
Yeah.
filled the room,
Hmm.
and it's palpable. You can feel it. and you start to learn that that is a thing, and you start to learn how to manipulate it, how to expand it and bring it back in. And all of these things become ingredients of the cake that we call doing magic. I think when you grow up in it, when it is all you do, like anything else, you become it and it becomes you. You become one with your art, for want of better words.
Mhm.
But if you start at a very late age, like again, like everything else, you've got a lot of self-made hurdles that you have to get rid of. We call them the 8-year golden chains. When I say we, I'm talking about mystics in general.
You called it what?
The 8-year golden chains. They're chains because you are restricted and limited by them, but they're golden because they are chains that you take on board. Let me give you a very rough, for instance. Someone, they leave school, they have children, they get married, they marry someone that they grew up with at school, and they get a wonderful job and they get into enormous amounts of debt and they get their house. And then they discover spirituality and they start to, you hear them say things like, don't get me wrong, I love my children dearly, but if I had it all over to do again, knowing what I know now, I wouldn't have done it. I would probably
Mm.
be a monk. That they're 8-year golden chains. They're wonderful. They're loving. It's your children. It's your home, but it's restricted your life now because you've grown up. You've become mature. You realize that, like everyone else, there's got to be more to life than this, and you start looking into it. And if you're not smart enough, you start to regret it, and that's bad. I've probably gone too far now, way off the question, but
No, no, it's so you're not just a layperson. You're any person out there, and you see a book of this type, and you have a like most people, you wear a special ring or special clothes or something. We're all superstitious in that sense, where the superstition is pushing our belief such that if I have this little thingy, then everything is okay.
yes,
And everyone has those. So it's a matter of slight adjustments in belief.
absolutely.
But you can't spend a year being deaf and another year being blind and another year unlearning this and dropping your family responsibilities and all that. But you still want to be able to do magic.
Yes.
And of course, especially in the crass Western world, you want to do it today for no expense, right? It
Oh
should be
yeah, we live in the what's it called? The entitled age. Yeah.
yeah, the entitled instant gratification. I want it now. So, so part of the story then in a book like this is, yeah, magic is real. There's some pretty good scientific evidence for this. Historically, it makes sense. From a philosophical worldview, it makes sense. There's a lot of reasons why, but can you do it?
Mm,
Because after all, I'm writing a manual essentially on how to do practical magic.
yeah.
So what I want to say is carve out 3 years of your life where you have no other responsibilities
Yes.
and figure out a way
Minimum.
so that you don't need to worry about where food's coming from or rent or anything like that. Well, then 99.99% of the people reading it are saying, I can't do that. So tell me an easier way to do it.
Yeah.
Well, the answer is there is no easier way. It requires a lifetime of learning and unlearning in order to get to a point where somehow you're able to do it. So that would not be a very popular book because then people would get to the end of page one and they wouldn't want to read it anymore.
Yeah. Here's a book about something you don't want to do. Yes. Okay. So.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the obvious. I mean, it's the honest way of presenting this. So we could say then at the bottom first page, if you still want to be able to go ahead and do something, well, then these are the various ways that you can take whatever wherever you are in life now
Yes.
and still achieve something.
There is a way around it, Dean.
Ooh, the secret. What is the way around it?
You make your hurdles, instead of seeing them as a hurdle or a barrier, you make them an object of your practice. Let's say we're talking about meditation and people, oh, I can't meditate, I don't have the time, I've got children. Meditate on your children. Focus on your children. Meditate on them. Meditate on your, I'm in too much pain. Meditate on your pain. I had one young man, he was young, 45. Compared to us, he was young. He was
Sure.
living in Las Vegas, literally on the strip there somewhere. And he was saying that he can go out into the desert, no problem, and he meditates quite well, which I wouldn't consider meditation. But he goes, as when I come home to do it, and I'd like to do it at home, but when I come home to do it, I'm absolutely agitated, always agitated, and I'm twitching, and my mind's racing. So I'm resigned to having to go somewhere else to do it. And what I had to point out, well, the first thing I said was, well, why don't you meditate on your agitation? It's right there with you. It's great. And he fell off his bed. He just he fell backwards because he thought he was meditating and he wasn't. Anything
Mm.
can be an object of meditation. Eventually, though, you have to drop the object, but it can be used. If you have children and your children are absolute assholes, they're going to conjure shit up inside you. I can't meditate. This shit's always coming up. My kids are always screaming. Watch this thing coming up and don't respond to it. Just watch it come up. What's that? It's agitation. Watch it. Suddenly now it's not a barrier. It's something that you can practice not responding to, which is what meditation is all about. Non-response. And when you can go in there, when you can sit inside your mind and be aware of the chattering, be aware of Dean talking. I'm talking, let's say you're the one that's doing the meditation. If you're
Mhm.
sitting in the center of your being, Dean's chattering away over here, pretending to be you. Thoughts are going on over there. There's itches on the nose, the body's aching. But if you can just train yourself not to move and allow all of that to go on around you, and you just be the eye of the storm, unmoving, not responding, coming or going from any of that, unmoved by it, then you can bring that out into the outer world. And then it doesn't matter what shit's going on around you out here, you're unmoving. And of course, the ultimate, and this is what it's for, when you're on your deathbed, literally on the day of your death, if you can hold that, and most people don't remember their death because they faint at that moment out of fear and horror. If you can maintain that centralness and crystallize that beautiful central perfect awareness that you were when you were born, if you can just hold that in your death, you'll see the brain closing down, you'll see the body closing down, but you won't move, you won't respond. You'll see the whole process of death. And once the body's died, you can maintain that. This is what the Tibetan Book of the Dead is about. That's something else I did for a whole year, was to sit with dead people and talk them through it. And of course, over there, they believe, I'm not going to use that word, over there, they perceive that it takes 3 days to completely leach yourself out of the meat that you inhabit. So you talk them through it. You go, okay, you know me, I'm the monk from up on the hill. I've been with you for many, many decades in your village. My name is da 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 da. You actually have been dead for a little while now. In our realm, you've been dead for about a day. You're probably seeing lots of yellow and you're probably feeling this color. Don't worry about that. That's just you moving out of your liver. So you talk to them like they can still hear you, and you take them all the way through, and don't let them faint, don't let them forget, and don't let them drift off. And if you do it correctly, you produce what's called a Rinpoche.
Mm.
And you understand the Rinpoche?
Mm.
Good. I don't have to explain that to you. So that's what meditation does, real meditation.
Mm.
Over thousands of years, millions of mystics have seen this conundrum that when this animating force leaves the matter, you've got death and it goes back to dust. Animating force comes back in, you've got a living creature again. What is this thing? How do we re-identify and experience this thing, and which one are we? So it comes down to, well, you first need to discern the difference between the two. Which one are you identifying with, and is it the correct one? Anyway, long story short, over thousands of years, these millions of mystics have tweaked it and refined it and polished it and tweaked it and refined it, and they've come to a very, very definite small handful of practices that will do that for you. It will slowly train you to re-identify with what's called the original mind. The original mind that created all of this, the ocean that creates a sponge, if you want to look at it that way, and the original mind as in the one you were born with, the one that nature produced. We call it the host and the guest. When you're born, little baby, brand new, beautiful, clean, state of awareness in there, no thoughts, no opinions, no beliefs, none of that stuff. But then this ego gets put in there by other people, starting with your parents, of course. And that comes later. That's a man-made thing. So that we call that the guest, because that came later. And then it takes over. Then it's a prick. But we don't actually have a word for that. And that's what you have to deal with later on in life when you decide to get back onto the path of mysticism. And this is what we're talking about. How is that done? Mm-hmm. And if you break down all of the traditions around the world that actually consistently produce enlightened people, you will find there is a golden thread, and it's identical through all of them.
So what's the difference between what you're describing as meditation versus what a psychologist might call dissociation?
I don't think there's very much. Meditation, I'm more clear on the meditation than the dissociation. The dissociation, are you talking about?
Well, in a pathological sense, if somebody becomes dissociated, that they feel like nothing is real anymore. Like, that the world isn't real and their experience isn't real. And I mean, that's at the point where it's really becoming pathological, but
I see.
it's considered debilitating and a disorder because you can't tell the difference anymore between you and anything else because nothing feels real. And so, as from a point of view of being a productive person in society, you're not anymore. You're just.
I got you. Well, those people are still identifying with the ego at that point. And in meditation, you would watch the dissociation. You would watch it and just have a smile about it, and it wouldn't be an issue to you. It wouldn't be a barrier. You would see it as just being a state of mentality that's not true, and you would do nothing about it. Getting back to, for instance, John Nash, similar thing. I know it's not dissociation, but it's a matter of being able to ignore it. I have a great, sorry, man, I'm tired. Bear with me. I have great success with people with certain psychoses and people with schizophrenia, in that I can take them away from their thought process to a point where they can watch who they used to think was them. They can watch their ego being schizophrenic. They can watch their psychosis. And when they get very good at that, when the psychosis starts to get out of hand, instead of taking medications or whatever substance they're taking, they can sit back and you don't say this, but it's an attitude of, okay, ego, if you're not going to behave yourself today, I'm out of here, and I'm just going to be here until you get your shit together. And that's the attitude you have. So you go back into this pristine, clean awareness. Because the awareness isn't a physiological thing, It's not. It doesn't succumb to psychosis. It doesn't succumb to schizophrenia. It doesn't succumb to anything because it's not physical. None of these things apply to it. The problem is focus, because we're not taught from the word go to keep that there, to crystallize that focus and protect it like you would protect your own heart. Protect it as Om Mani Padme Hum, the jewel in the center of the lotus. And that's what it is. It's the jewel that you are, the jewel that you were born as, and you have to protect it. So you don't allow anything of the brain matter to disturb that. But it's a focus. You've got to learn. It's called crystallizing. You have to learn to crystallize it so it never leaves. So when you're going in and out of meditation in order to regain your composure, you haven't crystallized it, which means you don't identify with that yet. Crystallizing it means, oh my goodness, I used to think I was those thoughts, that as I'm knowing this, thoughts, and still think they are me. You don't think this because you have to jump back into the thoughts to think, so that becomes a crock of shit. But it's a subtle, deep, tacit knowing. Getting back to how do you know you love your wife? I just know. It's that. And once you identify with that as well, it's the original, the real you, the you that was born. Once you start to identify with it and you no longer identify with the thoughts and the psychology and the brain, it's like owning a dog that you love, even though it spews up occasionally on the carpet, if that makes sense.
So when you're when you're describing this, let's say a primordial form of awareness, which is what you are.
Ooh, nice.
We're using the word you to point to what that thing is. And the words you, me are ways of encapsulating, typically thought of as ego, but more importantly, as not the rest of the universe, right? Like you enter your body, you die from your body, and then all of that is constrained. So what a bit of confusion then in my mind is, we can think of, and this, by the way, this is similar to the idea of a kind of materialistic spiritualism. It's taking the concept of spiritual as being interconnected with everything, and everything is wonderful and light and whatever, but still isolated, still like it's still you. And so now I'm thinking, okay, so you're in the process of dying. You've learned how to focus your awareness on that, just the awareness. Well, then, is that thing that is focusing on the awareness, is that in fact the interconnected universe, or is it not yet? It is still separate in some way from the one big mind.
You don't know that. No, it's bigger than that. It's the awareness that's doing the focusing. The awareness is you. That's what you are. That's what mind is. It's awareness.
But is that universal awareness? See, so sometimes I use this term of little c and big C. So little c is your consciousness, your awareness, and big C is universal awareness. It's just out there. So when we're in the body, we're pretty much little c. That's where we use words like me and mine and whatever. That's ego, but nevertheless, it feels like internal awareness. And I see then that the process of moving into a mystical worldview is to recognize that little c is actually part of the big C. It's a drop of water in the ocean. But you're still a drop of water for a long time. Something is making you think that you're a drop of water until full-blown mystical experience where you suddenly realize, no, actually, I am the ocean. Most people are not going to get there. I mean, unless you have 10 years you can set aside to be able to go there, or if you're naturally talented. But I kind of suspect that in order to become a very effective magician, you need to be operating from the point of view of big C, not little c.
Permanently, absolutely. And